Welcome back to another episode of the Leading and Learning podcast with Panorama Education. My name is Brittany Blackwell. I am the customer marketing lead here, and I am here today at ISTE with Dr. Jeremy Sullivan from North Kitsap. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
I'm very excited to talk to you today because you've done a lot of amazing things innovation-wise. You're here at ISTE speaking. So can you tell a little bit about what you do at North Kitsap and all of the great things that you're doing?
Yeah, so at North Kitsap, I like to say that I straddle the entire fence of technology and how we use it in our schools. So I get to work with the amazing back of house team, but then really the bread and butter of my work is how we use our technology for teaching and learning and also for meeting student needs. So my title is Director of Innovative Learning and Student Supports, which really, if it's technology and it can in any way serve our system or kids, that's in my wheelhouse.
Yeah. And I think a lot of districts right now in Washington are thinking about how they can use AI to be supportive of students, but also do it in a way that is safe and regulated. How has North Kitsap really done this thoughtfully?
Yeah, I use the word thoughtfully. That's absolutely what it was. Thoughtfully and purposefully. We sort of dove in very early on. Once ChatGPT and large language models came out, we were like, okay, this is going to hit us fast. How can we start to wrap our heads around it? And so we put together a work group just to start to explore and anticipate what the disruption would look like and what the implications were for both the teaching side and then the learning side for kids. And then we put together a formal plan. We're about to start year 2 of our formal AI implementation plan. Year 1 was focused on teacher readiness and system readiness, introduction to the tools. How can it lighten load, make life easier, and help you sort of reach the goals you've always wanted to do? And then year 2 is where we're looking for classroom tools scaling, so kids get to start to touch the tools more. Year 1 was our AI lighthouse classrooms that had their kids touching the tools. And then with year 3 being the goal of scaling to a more student ownership, so where kids are able to access a variety of resources and choose how to use them. Partnering it with digital citizenship, media literacy, and AI literacy classes happening. We developed a K-12 scope and sequence, so that way we know in our libraries what our library and media specialists are delivering, and then what lives within our classroom teachers. And so really it's designing an entire system of support around it, and then pulling the group together and constantly being like, well, what's new? What doesn't work anymore? What do we have to change? Because, I mean, a month goes by and everything's out of date now.
You said you had these lighthouse. How many did you have?
We have 27.
27.
Yeah. So I have elementary teachers and library media specialists. And then we have secondary teachers and secondary media specialists. And then all of our instructional specialists, so our teachers on special assignment, serve in that role as well.
What was the biggest challenge that you guys were trying to solve when you really started thinking about AI implementation, doing this thoughtfully, all of that? What was the challenge you were trying to solve?
Getting everyone on board with the same guidance.
Yes.
You know, because as with all things education, every stakeholder approaches the challenge from their unique perspective. And with something like AI that A, can be polarizing, B, there's still a lot of learning and misinformation out there about it, that it was just really important that we pulled together everyone and then engaged in those tough conversations to be like, okay, but what can we agree on?
Yeah.
And the only thing we really all were in agreement on right at the beginning is we can't ignore it.
Right.
You know, like something we have to address it. But it was really great. Washington did all of our districts a great service because they actually issued some really strong guidance as a state agency through OSPI. So we had our HAIH framework, which is human inquiry, artificial intelligence, human empowerment framework that really helped us get the ball rolling. So we were able to not go to our system with a blank canvas, but to be like, here's a draft. Now let's tear it to shreds, make it our own. What does it need to be for us?
Yeah, I think that's really important to really consider too when districts are going into these different implementations, to be thoughtful as you guys were, I think is a huge demonstration of what other districts can do in order to do this the right way. Was there anything that came up while you guys were kind of implementing this that surprised you?
Oh, surprises. I think the first surprise that I had was when we were starting to develop our plan. and I found out how many of our teachers were already using certain tools. You know, like when you're looking at adoption, you want to make sure you get a return on your investment. So you don't want to adopt something people aren't going to play with.
Right.
But then whenever I was able to be like, hey, do we have any users using sign up through Google or whatever? And to hear different tools that had really high levels of adoption of already,
Yeah.
that showed me that like, okay, buy-in's there.
Mhm.
People are at least curious, but now how do we harness this to move it forward? Because curiosity doesn't always mean willingness or on board. Curiosity can also be like, let me see what this thing is that is going to tear down education someday.
Right, right. Now, were there a lot of district leaders or teachers that were more skeptical than you thought?
Not necessarily skeptical. I just say thoughtful.
Yeah.
You know, like I think we all have to be. Like there are elements of like I am very aware of climate issues, not just tied to AI, but in general, that is something I care about. And
Right.
so I think for me personally, if it's like, oh, I could use this AI tool just for something super fun and silly on my phone on social media,
Right.
I'm probably not going to click that button because I'm in a way that. However, if it's something that can meet the needs of a kiddo in a way we've never been able to, I'm going to click the button.
Right.
I'm going to pick the kids. And so I think everyone is just sort of figuring out, hey, what is this? How do I feel about it? Where can it live within my practice? And just trying to be thoughtful, even though we're dealing with a tool that's iterating at such a fast rate that it's sometimes hard to be as thoughtful as you would like.
Right.
Especially when it just shows up in resources that you're already using and maybe your system's not ready for it to show up there yet.
That's a good point. That's a good point. So a lot of the things that you've used this year with Panorama, talk a little bit about the products that you used and like how that helps support the mission that you have.
Yeah, I would say Solara was huge for us this year. Solara paired with just Student Success Dashboard. So we've had the Success Dashboard for several years. And so we've had full system adoption of it for now at least 2 years, where down to our classroom level, they're going in, they're looking at their data, looking at the individual student dashboard, trying to check the early warning indicators and responding to their data. We've got a good groove with that. And so then introducing Solara this year was just perfectly timed, especially for our student study teams and like our MTSS teams that are really working their blueprints, like building your blueprints. And so we were able to use Solara to have them look at building level data, grade level data, group data, whole export data, but go in and help use Solara to help us identify tier 2 and tier 3 interventions, what works, what maybe isn't going to work, what exists within the playbook that we have resources available to. And it was so awesome to see just light bulbs, because even you mentioned maybe skeptics, there were definitely some more, not skeptical, but maybe not as tech savvy people on those student study teams. But whenever like I built a custom tool in Solara that auto fills their agenda for them based on the kid. So they attach the kid and it fills out all their data points, shows all the trends, and then it generates them discussion questions based on those kids to dive deeper into what's going on in the data. Like showing them that was mind blowing because they get to the real work, the human element of the work a lot faster. And so I'd say student success and Solara are huge for us. We have launched Class Companion, but we didn't launch it until second semester. The feedback from our teachers was very positive. They're excited.
Yeah.
But I think next year we'll start to see a lot more Class Companion use.
You've talked a lot about the data component of that. How has being a one-stop shop really supported you in this mission?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it helps us understand the story.
Yeah.
When you look at a single data point, it can freak you out.
Yes.
Or you can be like, yes, we've done everything. We're amazing.
Yeah.
But I think the beauty is when you can really triangulate your data and find the story. And the story comes from the humans that know the individual behind the numbers. So, I mean, in our student success, we have our attendance data, our academic data, our behavior data, social, emotional, student well-being, climate and culture. It's all there. All of our assessments, WIDA, SBA, iReady, Dibbles, all of it's there. It's wonderful.
Yes.
It's visually beautiful. But what it really needs is the adults to sit around and look at it and understand what all those points mean.
Correct.
It's a whole lot easier to do that when you've got it right in front of you, everything feeding into one spot instead of being like, all right, now pull up your admin dashboard for this. Now go to this spreadsheet where we keep this data. Now, if you remember, we have that shared drive from before.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just working smarter, not harder. Having it streamlined there, you can get to the work about what does all this mean and how do we help kids?
Yes. I think that has been the biggest thing for me as I've come into Panorama is being able to see all of those things work together. When I was a teacher in the classroom, I would have to go to all of these different places to get that information. And that was just it's a lot of work in order to do the one thing that was so important, which was, again, that human work. And I love the way that you really express that. Your session that you did at ISTE, talk a little bit about that. What
Oh, it
did
was
you
so
talk
much fun. So did a session first thing this morning, which is always a little daunting, 8:30 in the morning, but the energy was great. So the title of the session was Brains, Behaviors, and Screens, Teaching the Dopamine-Driven Generation. And so the session is really kind of broken into two parts. The first part is just sort of understanding the brain science of attention and regulation as it relates to our current generation and just their constant notification realm and the notification loop they live in. So I ground that sort of in the conscious discipline brain states model about talking about survival brain, emotional brain, and executive brain, and where do kids need to be to learn, and where does this constant notification loop often place them, and then how as the teacher we have to notice that and then bring them back into the executive state where they can learn.
Right.
And so the first part was just sort of understanding the brains, and part of giving everyone the freedom to recognize that because brains have been programmed a certain way, that can give us grace and we don't have to approach it all from such a frustrated, angry place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like these are kids.
Yeah.
And we start out by playing a game of dopamine boost bingo where the adults have to identify all the things they've done in the last 24 hours that give them that little tech boost.
Yes.
And I'm like, hey, y'all, we're all over 25 and we have fully developed prefrontal cortexes. Our kids don't, and yet we get really mad or frustrated. How can we pull ourselves out of that? And then the second half is really the designing the learning experiences. So if you're using technology, what questions do you need to explore to make sure you're being cognizant of student attention impacts now? How do you chunk the learning in the best appropriate way? How do you tech down when it's time to tech down and provide movement breaks or needed brain breaks? So variety of that. So brain science and then into the science of learning application of it.
That is incredible. And before we started this episode, you were telling us a little bit about that. And I was thinking about like all of the different ways that kids are on devices and all of those things. Also, how I may or may not have addressed those concerns with my kids. I think a lot of people who left your session are probably leaving with a renewed sense of like, what can they do better? And then also like, these are ways that our kids are interacting and they don't have that prefrontal cortex. So a lot of really great things. Did you hear anything from any of the attendees on like nuggets they're taking away?
Yeah, the feedback was really good. There were a lot of people in the space that hadn't experienced any conscious discipline or the work of Dr. Becky Bailey. And if you're looking to just get a really easy, digestible way to understand student behavior, I think it's great. And so that was a huge nugget that a lot of people really got. And then what I loved is at the end, they had time. So they were reviewing kind of different 7 strategies to use when planning. But then I open it up because I always believe the smartest person in the room's the room.
Right.
So they had a place where they had to add their own group's ideas. And so then seeing what other people were like, oh, I tried this, I do this in my class, or I've had success with this. Because I mean, really what we're talking about here is just efficacy and can I make a difference?
Yeah.
And a lot of times when it comes to technology, there's this defeatist attitude of, I got to have the computers in my classroom. There's nothing I can do about it. That's where the curriculum is. And we give away so much of our power as the adult in the space who understands what needs to happen for learning if we throw in that towel. And so I really want to encourage teachers to use their expertise to design the learning that's right for the kids based on what the kids need, not just where the learning happens to live in that moment.
Yes. Such good stuff right there. And you mentioned earlier you're moving into year 2.
Uh-huh.
Talk a little bit about how's that going to look different than year 1?
Yeah, so the biggest difference within year 2 would be hoping to see more students getting to touch some of the
Yeah.
resources in their learning. Year 1 system-wide was focused on the teachers, but like I said, our lighthouse people were starting to use them with kids.
Okay.
And so we did have some tools starting to land in the hand of kids. So next year we would hope to see, in the boring data behind the scenes, greater adoption in the numbers. The kids are getting to interact with them. What I care a whole lot more about is how they're being used. Are we using them to create some meaningful engagement for the students? Because right now, like, if it's not enhancing or transforming, if there's not a benefit I'm really trying to lean into, then don't do it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, don't go to the flashy just because it's flashy. And so I would love to see some real use cases being shared out. The AI Lighthouse people, we'll all pull together towards the end of October, early November. And so I really am hoping to hear when they pull together how they're seeing different teachers using it, or that they're being asked to come in to model lessons or present at a faculty meeting.
Yeah.
Because by the end of next year, the goal would be that there's not a student within our system that hasn't been exposed to a student-facing tool in some way, even at the primary level. The teachers can facilitate it. The kids don't need to be touching it, but we can still have those conversations and they can see how these tools can be a resource.
Yeah.
So I'd say I will feel very good if by the end of this year, all of our students have gotten to not just hear that their teacher has used a tool, but also gotten to experience it.
Do you happen to know any steps?
No.
Okay.
Not from the biggest thing we have from kids right now is they're asking a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Like, the students are very concerned about the climate impact.
Yeah.
Like, that's a huge thing that we're noticing. And so, which is great. I love that. Ask those questions, ask the tough questions, but it also reveals that if we're going to ask tough questions, we got to be willing to look beyond headlines and find real answers.
Yeah.
And so, like, real answers are absolutely AI, climate impact on water for cooling systems. You know what else has a huge impact on climate? Streaming video.
Yeah.
Huge impact. But we're not really, that's not the disruption of the day. So we're not focusing on that. But so I'm all for, let's have these conversations, but we need to expand it beyond just the AI sphere and into just how are we nurturing and taking care of our planet?
Yeah.
I'd say that's probably the biggest pushback from our students has just been environmental concerns and climate impact. And so one of the ways we help address that is break down the facts. Like, so what is the impact of a 5-minute chat prompt versus what is the impact of an image generation versus a video generation versus training an entire large language model? And so just really quantifying what the realities are instead of going off just headlines.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. One of the things that I was thinking about when I was asking that question is, how is the district thinking about the mix of digital literacy and the curriculums that you guys are choosing, and what is the mix of that?
I'd say go back to that word purposeful.
Yeah.
Is really ensuring that the resources we're looking at, and we're kind of at the tail end of several years of adoption. So as we now look to starting the cycle over, thinking through what do the virtual resources look like, especially from an equity standpoint, wanting students to be able to access those resources regardless of where they are. But then also, is it reliant on engagement gimmicks and tactics? Like, is it trying to mimic what's happening in the video game world? Like, where we're trying to get kids to learn but really we're doing it by having them experience never-ending cycles of accumulation of tokens, of skins, of stuff.
Right.
That not necessarily my jam unless it can really be tied to learning science.
Right.
But you know what I mean? So, like, show me how kids are learning, because I'm going to care a lot more about that. And then help me understand why yours is going to be engaging and kids are going to want to do it.
Yeah.
But don't come at it from the place of what they love about Fortnite or what they love about blah, blah. We do that exact same thing here to keep them engaged. That's not going to be enough for me.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I do have 2 other questions about Solara. How specifically has Solara helped you guys meet the Washington state requirements around AI transparency and student privacy?
Well, the awesome thing with Solara is, I mean, you guys have every certification under the sun for data privacy. Yeah, I mean, you've got your SOC, you've got all of it. And so that really was an easy one for us. Plus, we already trusted you with all of our student data because before we even went to Solara, we were using Panorama for student success. And so it gave us a really unique opportunity to still harness the power of AI with actual student data in a very safe, secure, and scrubbed environment. And that was something that none of our other tools could offer that. Now they can't, like they meet data requirements, other tools that we use, like we're not concerned about that, but we are specifically telling our system, you do not upload data into this. Like, yeah, they say that it's all good to go. That's wonderful, but that's not what we're using these tools for. So we have the tools that are much more like kind of general classroom tool instruction. But if you're using real student data, you're only doing it in Solara.
That's a good way to describe that too. Since implementing Solara, has this reduced like compliance workload or any other measurable things that you've been able to see thus far?
I would say the workload and time is the big thing people get back. And I'll speak selfishly for my role because I'm in charge of all of our district data as well. And so I spend a large quantity of time both analyzing quantitative and qualitative data within our system, choosing how to represent it, how to show it out to the community in an easy to understand way, to understand the actions taken from it. And so using Solara in data analysis has just hours and hours and hours of time.
Yeah.
Whether it's quantitative or qualitative. I mean, I don't miss my colored sticky notes and my themes of my note cards and everything all over the wall. Like, don't miss those moments. So I'd say that's the biggest thing. And then what I mentioned before, like how our student support teams can get to the work faster. Actually, how are we going to help these kids, not what kids need help?
Right.
You know, that question gets answered through the platform pretty easily. Just get to the work much faster, the work that matters and will actually impact.
Yeah. About how long were you spending beforehand? I'm just curious.
Oh gosh, I think you may be able to go through some like old Panorama stuff because I think I quantified it once for you guys. I looked at it. I would say in general, anytime we do, so like, let's just say the regular Panorama collection. So we do those 3 times a year. So I would say I'm saving 10 hours a collection. But then I would say when you look like at my end of the year reporting that I put together, I'm putting together deeper reports that are more disaggregated than they've ever been and still in a fraction of the time that it used to take.
Yeah.
And from different perspectives.
Right.
Like I can disaggregate at a much different level. I can create subgroups at a much different level. So when we look at behavior and SEL trending down, you know, like I can just get so much more granular. Because in the end, it's not about understanding what it's telling us. It's what do you do with that information? And I want to get to that way faster.
Action. Yeah, absolutely.
I want that to be where we're investing our time.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's the move that we are huge in seeing at Panorama is just what is that next thing? We want to have that insight, but then we also want to take the action. Thank you again, Dr. Sullivan, for just being here with us today and for chatting about what you're doing in North Kitsap, all of the amazing work that you're doing, but also your session here at ISTE. It's just been a wonderful conversation.
Great. Well, thanks for letting me join you.
Yeah. For those of you who are watching us on YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button and listen along because we have more amazing district stories just like this.